Welcome back to the program. So I got an interesting email from one of you, and I'm not going to say who it is because I promised that I wouldn't. But after the fact that James Comey was indicted, I guess this person's been watching for many, many, many years, and they just sent me a very nice email. And just to kind of sum it up, it said, Josh, thank you for fighting for us. Thank you for always being there. Thank you for being honest and ethical. And then it said, how do you get these things so right? Why is it that when we hear something in the media, one person says it's going to go out this way, but then you cover the story and you say, no, don't worry about it. It's going to come out the right way. I don't have a legal background. Okay. I didn't even graduate college like Charlie Kirk. I just been studying this stuff for so long. I know the Constitution. So I think that helps, obviously. And I use a lot of common sense. And because I've studied all this stuff for almost 13 years now, I guess, I've been able to make accurate predictions. Does it mean that I know everything? No, it doesn't. I mean, I don't know as much as, someone like a John Eastman or a Mike Davis from the Article 3 Project or anything like that. But I do know enough. And once I feel as though I'm confident in what I know, then I will go out on a limb and say, hey, here's what's going to happen. And I'm right 99.9% of the time. Well, not to do another Jostradamus, but just the other day, we were talking about the masks. I don't remember who asked me. Somebody asked me. It might have been on Full Throttle. It might have been somewhere else or in the comment section. Somebody asked me about Gavin Newsom and this new deal that he just signed into law saying that it's mandatory for ICE agents to be unmasked. And I said, don't worry about it, okay? First of all, he doesn't have jurisdiction. He doesn't have the basis to even do this law. It is unconstitutional. And quite frankly, ICE will be told to ignore the law. And people are thinking, what? Like, how can that be? Well, because once again, I know what I'm talking about. And this is what just broke, maybe 10, 15 minutes ago while I was putting this show together. And here's what it says. Well, first off, I wrote on X, hey, California residents, do you want to know why your state is such a disaster? Well, maybe it's because you have a corrupt, incompetent, and unqualified leftists leading it, like at Governor Newsom and at Mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, and other intellectual lightweights and rejects ruining your state. As I said on my show the other day, ICE agents will ignore the law banning the wearing of masks. And lo and behold, right here, acting U.S. Attorney Bill Asili, if I'm pronouncing his name right, Gavin Newsom is confused about his role under the U.S. Constitution. He oversees California, not the entire United States of America, nor our federal agencies. He should review the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution. California's law to, quote, unmask federal agents is unconstitutional as the state lacks jurisdiction, as I said, to interfere with federal law enforcement. I have directed federal agencies to ignore this new state law and adhere to federal law and agency policies. So once again, Gruesome Newsom, the moron, was wrong, and there is absolutely zero that he can do about it because he doesn't have jurisdiction. That's what happens when you hire DEI candidates. That's what happens when you hire these idiots, and let's call them what they are, that don't have any experience other than looking for ways to subvert the Constitution. That's what they do. That's what the left does. We have a Constitution. We have a Bill of Rights. We have a guideline to follow to keep law and order, to keep freedom and liberty and prosperity for all. And what does the left do every single time? They see it. They don't read it, obviously, and they go, well, let's just ignore that and let's just do whatever we want. And let's not, just ignore the fact that we have a Constitution, ignore the fact that we have Bill of Rights, ignore the fact that we have laws on the books. That's what these activist judges are doing. That's why I said on all these activist judges, don't worry, they're going to get smashed. at the Supreme Court. What did I call them? I called them judicial gnats, right? They're flying around, they're buzzing around, they cause a ruckus, but eventually they get swatted down. And that's exactly what happened to Newsom. So if he does decide to run for president in 2028, let's make sure voters are reminded of his stupidity. Anyway, let's get into this now. So on September 22nd, 2025, President Donald Trump issued an executive order and he designated Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. The order describes Antifa as a militant, anarchistic enterprise that explicitly calls for the overthrow of the United States government, their law enforcement authorities, and our entire system of law. So they are anarchists, right? It uses illegal means to organize and execute a campaign of violence and terrorism nationwide to accomplish these goals. The executive order accuses Antifa of recruiting and radicalizing young Americans, concealing its funding and its coordination with other groups, here's the kicker, to promote political violence and suppress lawful speech. The designation directs federal agencies, the important part, to use all available necessary authority and tools to investigate, disrupt, and dismantle Antifa's operations, including prosecuting those who support or fund their activities. Now, if you go to opensecrets.com, which you don't have to do, you will literally see no Republicans, maybe one or two, but really no Republicans, and nothing but Democrats just handing over money to their Lord Soros, okay? Dark Vader Soros, basically. And now, those people that have given that money, when they investigate Soros and the Open Society, they could now be held accountable for funding a terrorist organization. And of course, George Soros and the Open Society, which has, I believe, 140, somewhere around there, 140 umbrella companies that are part of the Open Society, that the majority are all left-leaning, and more importantly, he funds, okay? So you have this marriage of leftism between Soros at the top, who then, with the puppet strings, controls all the Democrats underneath him, and then when they get controlled, they have to do what their puppet master tells them to do, and more importantly, after doing it, what do they do to pay their puppet master? They give more money, more money, more money, more money, more money, more money to the Open Society Institute and George Soros. That is going to end. That is going to end because they are financing terrorism. And that's what the Department of Justice, they just hired 6 prosecutors to go through. They have an entire wing set up now just to go after the funding. That just happened, I think, 2 days ago. And so, who are some of these organizations? Well, the Open Society Foundation has publicly stated that George Soros doesn't fund Antifa. Well, that's a lie. Yes, he does. Because all the organizations, see, it's word language. It's using words to kind of hide the truth. Oh, we don't fund them directly, wink, wink, but we fund all these groups underneath that are part of Antifa. So you see what I'm saying? So they're going to go after, obviously, Antifa, but they're going to go after the funding mechanisms. So then it says, we do, however, fund groups working for racial justice. It should say radical, but it says racial justice in the United States. Despite this claim, reports from the Capital Research Center show that the Soros Foundation, the Open Society Institute, has poured more than $80 million into organizations tied to extremists and direct actions of Antifa terrorists. Okay? They are now being classified as domestic terrorists. That's what this whole designation is all about. Several groups and networks provided documented legal and financial support to Antifa-related activities. The International Anti-Fascist Defense Fund, for example, has donated over $250,000 to more than 750 anti-fascist and anti-racist organizations in 26 countries since the year 2015. Now remember, because they are now designated as a terrorist organization, that no longer gives them just a domestic title. They are now international, which means that we now will be able to smash them, not just in America, but in other countries as well. And there are many countries that have already said that they're going to join in and take down Antifa. I think Austria was one, Slovakia was another, there was a couple others. I think Russia is going to do it as well. So you're going to have a global response here, which is wonderful. Then it says, where is it? Here it is. The Anti-Fascist Handbook was actually funded by the National Lawyers Guild. Again, the lawyers, the left-leaning lawyers, right? They need to be able to do what they do. They need the people underneath them. So they'll wear their Armani suits and get dressed up nice. But they're really all Antifa too, most of them. And its foundation reported combined revenues of over $3 million in 2018, supported in part by grants such as $2.7 million from Greater Horizons, $110,000 from the Warsh Mott Legacy Foundation, and matching grants from the CS Fund for the NLG's Mass Defense Program. Legal defense and bail networks have also played a key role. The National Bail Fund Network, which coordinates 80 local bail funds across the United States, is run through the Soros-funded Tide Center Community Justice Exchange. So there you go. There you go. So Soros funds, I've told you this before, he funds these district attorneys, these soft on crime prosecutors that refuse to put anybody in jail. So he funds them, he gets these people in place, then those places, those prosecutors that are soft on crime, then work with the National Bail Fund Network, which then coordinates not to have bail. That's where cashless bail came from. Then Soros puts money into Democrat Party coffers, as well as to different assemblies, different state houses that are run by Democrats. And then what? They then pass laws on cashless bail in certain states. And then you have people going out, murdering people left and right, and getting out of jail. It has to stop, and it will stop. Legal defense and bail networks. Let's see. The Alliance for Global Justice, which has received hundreds of thousands of dollars from Soros nonprofits, financially supports bail funds like the Louisville Community Bail Fund. Other bail organizations frequently bailing out Antifa activists include the Action Bail Fund in New York City, the Minnesota Freedom Fund. You may remember them, right? Heels Up Headboard Harris was bailing people out in Minnesota. Remember that in 2020? Well, there you go. So you've got that one. Chicago Community Bond Fund, Brooklyn Community Bond Fund, Bronx Freedom Fund, Atlanta Solidarity Fund, the NLG, and the Center for Constitutional Rights, which is an absolute joke. Why would you name it that? Because there's no constitutional rights to allow murderers back out on the streets. Then Senator Heels Up Headboard Harris even encouraged donations during the 2020 riots, tweeting, quote, "If you're able to, please chip in now to help post bail for those protesting on the ground in Minnesota." She should be charged too. She should be charged. If any of those people killed someone or caused damage or whatever, she should be charged. And if you can get it done in time before the 5 years is up, well, then maybe you can get it done and not have to worry about the statute of limitations. Let's see, where are we? Politically, some Democrats have defended or been accused of sympathizing with Antifa-aligned causes. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene accused Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of supporting, quote, "terrorists and Antifa" due to her opposition to ICE and wanting to defund the police. Other members of the, quote, squad, Ilhan Nuar Saeed Elmi, Rashida the Mustache Tlaib, and Ayanna Pressley, have faced similar criticism, with Democratic leadership figures like Representative Gregory Meeks and House Speaker Bela Lugosi defending them against Republican attacks. With the designation of Antifa as a terrorist organization, those funding it, and possibly even politicians providing cover, could find themselves in criminal and legal jeopardy by the Department of Justice. So that's wonderful. Now, I could go through and name all the different organizations. There's so many of them. And every single one of those organizations gives almost entirely and exclusively to Democrats. So there's a ton of Democrats around the country right now biting their nails because they're getting nervous. Because when they find out that all of this funding for terrorism now, for an international terrorist organization, they could be in major, major trouble. And let's hope that they are. Now, let's talk about this. Welcome back to the program. The biggest threat that America faces, besides international, which of course would be the CCP, and China, I think there's no larger existential threat to the entire world than China. But let's stick here domestically. It's not, right-wingers. It's not, Nazis, which there's barely any anyway. It's not any other street gangs and Crips and Bloods or anything like that. No. It is not even BLM. And quite frankly, it is Antifa, but it's more than that. It is the trans radical terrorists. That's what it is, okay? They are the most dangerous group of people and most violent group of people, bar none, in the entire country. That could be changing too. The Oversight Project, which has basically kind of grown from the Heritage Foundation into its own. And they sue, and they are very similar to Judicial Watch, right, with Tom Fitton and Jay Sekulow and Jordan Sekulow and the American Center for Law and Justice. Well, they're now a major player. And they are now pushing the FBI to designate a new subset designation, if you will, for domestic terrorism. Now, of course, the left said that anyone that believed in Jesus Christ, held a Bible, or stood in front of an abortion clinic was now, of course, an extremist, right? Well, we know that that's not the case. But these people are extremists. These people are violent, and they are deadly. Just ask Erica Kirk. So these trans terrorists are rising. However, the FBI, because of their designation as either non-binary, as trans, as whatever, two-spirit, whatever the hell they want to call themselves, it makes it difficult for the FBI to pinpoint exactly who they are. Now, in reality, almost every single one of them, almost, not all, but almost every one of them, is a male, violent male, pretending to be a female, right? We've seen it in the last 10 years or so, that the majority of these shootings are all done by these trans Tifa terrorists. Let's call them what they are. So, over the past 5 years, there have been more transgender mass shootings than in the previous 2 decades, okay? From 2018 to 2025, at least 4 or 5 confirmed cases appear consistently across sources, compared to just 1 case documented before 2018 in the Violence Project database, which tracks incidents back to 1966. Recent cases include the 2025 Catholic Church attack in Minnesota, where a transgendered individual killed 2 children and injured 17, leaving a manifesto threatening to kill Donald Trump. The August 2025 Minneapolis school shooting by Robert Westman, we'll call him. The March 2023 Nashville Covenant school shooting by Audrey Hale, who wanted to be known as, I guess, a guy. So there's your one weird female one, right? November 2022, Colorado Springs Club Q shooting. May 2019, Highlands Ranch, Colorado school shooting. September 2018, Aberdeen, Maryland warehouse shooting. Whoops. Here we go. It's been raining like crazy around here. Anyway, so the power just went out for a second, but are we good on the internet? Yeah, we're good on the internet, so the show shall roll on. Anyway, so they list a whole bunch of these trans testicle wacko shooters, basically, right? But then they go on to say that because in the crime database, people are listed biologically as a male or a female. They're not listed as anything else. So the Oversight Project has come up and is pushing the FBI to do a new designation. And what that designation would be is called Tive. T-I-V-E. Tive. And it stands for Trans Identified Violent Extremists. Trans Identified Violent Extremists. Now, what can happen, as my lights are going off because there's major storms in the area, keep that back on, is that there'll be new resources available. They'll be able to go through Steam, Reddit, whatever the other one was, Discord. They'll be able to go through and infiltrate all of these groups. They will have more resources to be able to do that. Right now, because they identify not as male or female, it makes it hard to find them in criminal databases, basically, right? But the reality is that once they have this new designation, then they'll be able to do that. And they should have been doing it already. That's the thing. It's so sad, and you see this all the time in politics. Someone has to get killed and assassinated, like the great Charlie Kirk, for anyone to wake up and realize there's a problem. We've been talking about these trans terrorists for 4, 5, 6, 7 years now. I mean, so many of them. But yet, the FBI didn't do anything. Well, obviously the other administration was never going to do anything about it. But even here, in the first 10 months or whatever it's been, why haven't they done anything? How come they haven't seen from all these other people that have done all these horrific crimes against people in the trans community, which isn't really a community, it's just a bunch of psycho-maniacal, diabolical freaks. But again, why haven't they taken it serious? Why did Charlie Kirk have to die from a trans weirdo lover? Why didn't they do something about it? It drives me crazy. So anyway, it looks like they are now pushing for the FBI to do this. I am hopeful that they're going to designate Tive as a new framework in order to facilitate more action. Howell added that once the threat is formally labeled, authorities would then be able to work with DHS to create fusion centers and joint task forces across federal, state, and local agencies, which would provide a legal framework for their action, allowing officials to identify the threat, align it with the statutory definition of domestic terrorism, and start investigating these acts intended to intimidate civilians and government officials. It would also enable prevention efforts similar to those used against radical Islam, examples of other radical pipelines, disrupting them in their communities, and even pursuing financial disruption of violent actors. And yes, of course, arresting them, spying on them, surveilling them, and everything else. According to Howell, this is the person that's referring this to the FBI, the transgender movement is completely out of control. They are completely violent, and they have fostered an environment where a subset of extreme activists engage in violent and domestic terrorist actions. He added that the desire of the trans extremists to eliminate their ideological opponents, in his view, is clearly domestic terrorism. So, we shall see what happens. Let's hope and pray that they get their act together and they come up with a new designation for Tive, because these trans wackos need to be eliminated. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. See you in the next one. Welcome back to the program. Okay, one more segment here, real quick. So we heard about the indictment, obviously, of James Comey. We now know that there's going to be others that are coming. But the entire thing happened in a very quick amount of time. Why? Well, because the former person, Eric Siebert, refused to indict not just Letitia James, not just Schiff, which is probably going to be soon anyway, but James Comey. Now, why is that? Why is that? Well, we know that Schubert was fired and replaced with this Lindsay Halligan, which we'll get into in a minute. But President Trump was saying that when he fired him, it was mainly because he was endorsed by two Virginia Democrat senators that are very far left, right? Mark Warner and Tim Kaine. And we all thought, well, okay, yeah, I understand. Get a new person in there. There's clearly evidence of crimes. The statute of limitations is running out. You got to do something and do it quickly. So guess what? He fired him, right? So now that guy's out. This Lindsay Halligan comes in, and within days, she then indicts James Comey. But why wouldn't Seifert do it? Was it just because he just didn't want to? Or was there something else? Well, there's always something else, isn't there? There certainly is. Listen to this. And actually, I'm going to let my buddy who endorsed preserving liberty tell you directly. Let's see, where is it? Is it in this one or in the next one? It's in the next one. Listen closely to what Roger Stone has to say. Right here. Let me make sure the volume's up.
Attorney who was fired by Donald Trump in the Eastern District of Virginia, Eric Siebert, prepared a 51-page memo arguing that former FBI Director James Comey should not be indicted for lying to Congress under oath. What he didn't include in his memo is the fact that Siebert has a stunning conflict of interest. You see, his father-in-law, the father of his wife, is the godfather to James Comey's daughter. You can't make this stuff up. So the U.S.
Did you hear that?
Who is his father-in-law,
Listen.
His memo is the fact that Siebert has a stunning conflict of interest. You see, his father-in-law, the father of his wife, is the godfather to James Comey's daughter. You can't.
Once the deep state, always the deep state. That's what happens. One guy gets in, has a career. Next thing you know, everyone is around that person. Then that person has that conflict of interest. Then their son here. Remember Merrick Garland? He had the issue where he was going after people. Meanwhile, I think his daughter-in-law or something was tied to one of the prosecutions. You had Juan Marchand and the daughter also tied was somehow, I can't remember exactly what it was, to the Trump, investigation against President Trump. They're all interconnected. It's amazing how many of them. And by the way, not only are they interconnected, but they're interconnected to the media. To the media more. So in other words, a lot of the people in the media are married or are related to all these deep state criminals. So let's talk about this one real quick. So here we go. Here it is. So James Comey's son-in-law worked in the Eastern District for Virginia. His name was Troy Edwards, and he was Comey's son-in-law. So the son-in-law was also a prosecutor who enjoined the case against the Oath Keepers, went out of his way to get on that case to try to put those innocent people in prison. Terrible. Now there's more. So this person Here it is right here. Whoops. It keeps going out on me. Here it is. So let's talk about the Seifert, or Siebert, his name is, and the ties here. All right, so okay, we withdrew the nomination, yada yada yada. Yeah, we got that. Okay, no problem. So let's see. Here it is. What the legacy media won't tell you is that President Trump had every reason for firing Siebert. Eric Siebert, the U.S. attorney fired by President Trump, had prepared the 51-page thing that Roger Stone just talked about. Let me move past that. Okay, Washington Post has now confirmed this relationship with Comey when former Vice President Mike Pence, you know, Judas Pence, who could have done the right thing but didn't, yeah, him, has now obtained the father-in-law. His name is Richard Cullen. Vice President Pence became the latest member of the former Trump administration to lawyer up on Thursday, announcing that he had hired an outside attorney by the name of Richard Cullen to deal with the ongoing probe of Russia meddling in the 2016 U.S. elections. So let's think about that for a second. You had Mike Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, who pretended to be a patriot, pretended to be America first, pretended to be MAGA all the way until Trump turned around and he stabbed him right in the back. And you know what? He knew in 2016, and we're probably going to find out that he knew all about the Russia conspiracy. Why else would he be lawyering up? What would be the reason? He's a traitor. So let's see. News reports describe the sterling reputation of Cullen, 69, former Virginia Attorney General, longtime Washington insider and deep stater, who played crucial roles in some of the most high-profile political investigations of the last several decades. But other parts of his resume attracted even more interest. For 3 years, Cullen worked at the Richmond law firm with a central figure of the Russia investigation, FBI Director James Comey, who was just fired by Pence's boss, President Trump. And not only that, Cullen and his close associates, as news reports described, but he is also the godfather of one of Comey's daughters. You can't make this stuff up. Unbelievable. Then it goes on to say just the fact that it is possible that when Siebert might have been one of the attorneys inside the District of Virginia that immediately came out right after the indictment or right at the indictment and said, there's nothing here. There's no probable cause. You can't indict James Comey. This is, this is a witch hunt, blah, 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 blah. Oh, really? You're the one that prepared a 51-page memo saying not to prosecute your father-in-law? Really? And we're supposed to believe that? Come on. So it looks like he's gone. And now there was another one, the Troy, what was his name? Edwards guy, who also just resigned. He might have been somebody that also was going to impede the investigation. And it's just amazing. It's like garbage in, garbage out. There are probably still so many moles in so much of the Department of Justice, the State Department, everywhere. It just makes me sick. Why can't they all be found? Now, when they are found, they're getting rid of them. But there's so many of them. So who is Lindsay Halligan, and why is she so much better, obviously, than any of these other folks? Well, she is an American lawyer who served as the interim United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia since September of 2025, September 21st, I think, or 20th, somewhere around there. So within a week, she indicted James Comey, which is pretty awesome. Then it just says that she used to be the White House Senior Associate Staff Secretary since January of 2025. Halligan graduated from Regis University and then the University of Miami School of Law with a doctorate degree in law. She also became working as an insurance lawyer and eventually became partners at Cole, Scott, and Kissane in 2018. She also represented President Trump in his Trump versus United States garbage lawsuits. She helped with that as well. She also was the lawyer that requested the special master during the, Jackoff Smith investigation, all that garbage. She helped get the special master on board to make it more fair. And then, of course, Judge Cannon eventually dismissed the whole case because there was no crime there. What else? So bottom line is, she's somebody that has been by Trump's side. She's a MAGA loyalist, which is great, which means she has no problem indicting more and more and more of these people in her district, as she's now the district U.S. attorney for the Eastern District in Virginia, where all of these crimes allegedly took place. Not allegedly, they did. I'll say it. The only thing is, she's never prosecuted a case like this before. But that doesn't matter, because the Department of Justice has excellent lawyers that they can send over to help her to work with the case. The bottom line is, because of the other idiot and the compromises and everything else and the conflict of interests that they had with Comey, he wasn't going to go anywhere. They weren't going to do anything. Thankfully, the people inside the Trump administration said, not going to happen. We're going to put somebody in there that we know is loyal, someone that we know that we can trust, and they are going to do what needs to be done. And that, folks, is what is happening. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.